Welcome to Jesus-Centric Leadership. I'm Donna. I'm here with Pastor Josh, and we have a fantastic guest with us today. We have Anne Bultemeir, and she's going to tell us a little bit about when God says no. I feel like we could have named this a lot of things, right? Yeah. So, Kellyanne, I'd love for you to share with us kind of the story behind the story. What brought us to the point where you and Kent kind of wrestled with the no?
Yes. I think it all kind of came into focus for us in 2016 when we moved to Colorado. And actually one of our first stops when we moved here was Peace with Christ. We weren't even residents, and we found our home here before we even moved here. And I think that really laid the framework for recognizing God in our life and how he was putting us in places that we belonged without even our knowledge. And when we first moved here, we knew we wanted to have kids. That was the whole reason we were moving to Colorado, is to leave college athletics and have more of a work-life balance. And I couldn't get pregnant, and we met with doctors, and I am adopted, and I just said, oh, we'll just adopt. It's super easy. And fast forward 5 years of wait and a lot of no in our life, whether that be from opportunity or writing 50 letters to 50 birth mothers asking if we could have the honor of raising their child, and being told no.
So I want to kind of stop you there. The adoption world has changed a lot. I'm also adopted, and we've had conversation about that, but it's a whole different ballgame, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there's no's throughout that journey. I mean, obviously the biggest no was not our time to be parents, but there were, microcosms of no when we were met by different health challenges of maybe the birth mother or the kiddo, or what is our bandwidth or our family nucleus's ability to care for different kiddos with different needs. And Kent and I both work in healthcare, and we kind of felt like we met every opportunity with a yes. But really looking back, God said no, and it wasn't, our decision to have, basically. So I think we met a lot of opportunities with a yes. We feel called to yes, God will help us navigate these waters. But the no was from him because it wasn't our call.
Yeah. Wow. What was it like when you hit that first no? Because it sounds like there were many no's. And how did that season of no's kind of impact your faith and your relationship with God?
I think the first really big no, outside of all of the infertility no's, was a family out of Florida who had picked us. And I was driving to work, and I was thinking of how I was going to tell work we were picked. And 10 minutes before I logged into my computer, they called and said they changed their mind. They didn't think we were country enough. I'm from Iowa. Kent's from Indiana. I don't know what country enough means, but it felt so subjective and really hurtful because it was completely out of my control. And it felt like you just don't like who I am, which felt, I felt lost in that. But I know who I am as a child of God, and God doesn't care if I'm country or if I, like hip hop, or I don't even know what that means. But I rested in knowing, he knows who I am, and he knows I am not the right parent for that child. And that's not even within their control, that family's control. But that no just felt completely irrelevant. Really, like their reasoning behind it just felt odd. But I think that was the first time I recognized, no, this is more than just following my heart to where God's leading me. This is me resting in knowing God already has this figured out, and I really need to not overthink next. I really just need to live in this opportunity, this moment, and not get so far ahead.
Yeah, and how was that in the moment? Like, because probably it's easy to look back and say that, like, I know I need to follow God and not my heart. But like, how was that in the moment? And were you able to remind yourself that you were following God in there, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because if I'm honest, in that moment, I thought, did we hire the right videographer? Did we make the right adoption book? Why didn't they think I was enough country or rural or whatever term that in their mind they were looking for? Why didn't I do those things? And then that's when I had this, blanket of truth over me of just, actually, I am not any of none of that is relevant. None of that matters, because God says it doesn't matter, because I am still his and I am more than those things. And this decision was more than that. Yeah. It was more than a book or a video. It was just his timing and his choice. Yeah. So
I love how you said rested in knowing who I am and the blanket of truth. Yeah. So when did those start wearing thin? Did they ever?
Oh, absolutely. So after that situation, we actually got a call. It was Inauguration Day. I'll just not forget, of 2020. And it was a woman on the phone, and it was a birth mother. And she asked if I would be the parent of her child. And I'm, again, working in clinics, seeing patients, and just called me. And the social worker was on the phone and, was like, great news, you're picked. And for 8 months, we supported her, went to her appointments virtually, paid for her rent and housing. And she ended...
And started getting ready.
Yes.
You were getting a nursery ready.
We got a nursery ready. We painted a wall for the first time in like 6 years. And, we're making steps. We had an animal she sent us with the heartbeat. And we were forming a relationship with this woman. And I believe in my heart that it is every woman's choice to choose to parent in the end. And she chose to parent. And we flew to Florida, and she wasn't equipped, though, due to some choices she had made, and wasn't healthy enough. And that was, I think, the big moment of what is our next step, God? And there was maybe, if I'm honest, some anger in that of, this is now 8 years, and we've been going on these paths. Is your answer we're not to be parents? Like, is that where the end of the story is? And there's a song that's like, God, I'm not going to sing, but God's not done with you. That song just like echoed in the back of my head of like, if the story's just begun, it's not over. And I just held steadfast. And if it's not beautiful in his grace, it's not done. I just never felt like he was done with us. I was confused on why it felt so painful. But now I get to help other people through some of the darkest times. And maybe that's why, maybe that's my story, and he's still not done, but
right.
Yeah.
If you had to narrow it down to maybe like 3 things that really got you through that season, yes, it sounds like almost like the bottom, yes, of this time, of this search, of this hope, right? Mm-hmm. What would it be?
Well, our church family and church staff prayed over us before we left to Julian, the little boy I was speaking of, was supposed to be born August 15th, and we were flying there, and she had a planned C-section, so we kind of had a date in mind. We were all working towards that date, and Donna shared a story of God seeking a teenager who was on a different path than what was safe or what they needed, and God just pursued them relentlessly. And when we flew to Florida to adopt Julian, and she had already given birth, had chosen to parent, and we had another no, that story of God pursuing relentlessly, that, you, Donna, shared that story with me. It just rang in the back of my head of like, okay, this makes even less sense if I'm trying to think of what you're thinking. But, I can't think what God thinks. I am mere mortal. Like he has ideas that we're not even able to think of. And so that story really pushed us through. Evan Kraft sings a song called Everything Will Be All Right. That played on repeat.
I love that song.
Yes. Kent and I also hung out on a beach in silence for like 2 days because we were hanging around Florida hoping the state would change. The state was involved, hoping the state would change their mind. And we flew home, and then Callan was born the next day. So
I think it was the next weekend that you had us pray again because you were like, we're going back. And it was like, is this happening? I think we got the text in staff meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
We literally like stopped in the middle of staff meeting because our phone, we usually don't look at our phones, but our phones went off and we all looked.
Yeah. It was, I've got tears right now.
And God's big. I mean, he does things that you just look back and you're like, I'm pretty sure that feels intentional. He, Julian's due date was August 15th and Callan's birthday was August 15th. So, that was his plan. You know, we were going to be parents on August 15th, and we just had to believe that was his plan. Yeah. Yeah. So what got me through? 3 things. Our church family, for sure. I had just Connie Johnson, Callan just started our early learning center here, and she texted me the first day and said, I prayed for him before he was born. And that just, our church family, number one, got us through. And then Kent's commitment to me and my commitment to him in terms of willing to sit in the muck with each other, you know.
And that's not a pretty place to sit.
No. And then probably third, I'm adopted, and I know my story, and I feel that by me being adopted too, that has only equipped me for this journey. So, yeah.
How did all this shape your understanding or your depth of waiting on God?
I didn't know how to wait on God before. You know, I was fortunate when I met Kent. He was Lutheran and was in a Lutheran fraternity and was raised Lutheran, and I was raised Catholic. But I didn't know God outside of routine and ritual. And so I think when we moved here, that journey and that foundation was laid when we came to church, and Vera was the first church member to be like, hey, you look new here. I was like, yeah, we don't even live here. But, you know, that foundation was laid that day. And then I do believe that all of this was designed for me to actually have a relationship with him. So, and relationships are real messy.
Yeah. I want to go back and make one comment to just make sure that, like, the little Vera welcome, which she does very well, welcoming you to church did make an impact, like, on that journey and you finding a place and growing in your spiritual, and it supported you. And so I would just say to our listeners, remember the little things you do might make a big difference. And so focus into that. But then I guess the other thing to just ask you about in there is that idea that you trusted God, but that's something you had to learn.
Yes.
But, like, what would you say now, kind of looking back, that when people are in that space where they feel like God's saying no or wait, like, what would you encourage them to do in the waiting?
He doesn't do anything wrong, you know? I mean, some of the most terrible things that we walk through are not his work, right? And I think that you have to persevere through his patience and calmness that only he can provide. Otherwise, you're letting the devil, you know, mess with your mind and put you in a dark place that he doesn't want you to be in. He doesn't do anything to cause us pain, I don't believe. You can disagree with me, but I don't think he has the ability to cause pain, but I don't think that's his wish for us. And so I think that that's just what I've found is I have to surrender everything to him, knowing that he has only good intentions for me that I can't even imagine. And when I look at Callan and Carter, I'm like, how am I supposed to get through my day looking at you? Because I could just cry anytime I see them, because I just have been given such an amazing gift.
And for our listeners that don't know, and we're not going to camp on that story. Yeah. We'll have you back another time to do that. But Kaylin, you adopted. Yeah. Then you went back a year later and got Carter, adopted Carter, and they're brothers.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yes. And they had a NICU journey, and they can tell their story someday. But even the wait in the NICU was actually, looking back once we got over all the scary health stuff, was God's way of saying, just be with me here. It was the only time in our life where I think Kent and I, we didn't have work commitments. We didn't have family wanting to help, wanting to hold kids. It was just us two and our child in the NICU. And I mean, we had nurses, but there's Vera, there's Connie Johnson, there's different people throughout this story who just stick you with that story, Donna, when you prayed over us and shared that story about him pursuing a teenager and being relentless and showing them his love. The other piece is Callan, when we flew to Florida to adopt him, he was so sick. And Kent and I didn't really know what to do. And he was so sick to the point where the doctor said, the agency said, you can change your mind in 24 hours. And we were like, I'm sorry, what? He's the person? We just the nurse caught us looking at him with all of these emotions. We finally are parents of this amazing, sweet, beautiful little boy. And we're not sure if he's needing a blood transfusion. And the nurse turns around and says, honey, if he can lead you to it, he can lead you through it. And she was talking about God, And so she was the first person I called when we found out about Carter and said, he was born at Orlando Health. He wasn't born at Advent. And we met for lunch, and we got together with her, and she still follows them on Tiny Beans. But we didn't, I don't think, actually have a doubt that we were going to not be Callan's parents, but there was some scary stuff at the beginning, and she just, matter of fact, God led you to it, he will lead you through it. But she has worked in the NICU for 35 years, and I'm sure she's seen many of his miracles.
I love, we call them God sightings, right? And I love how you just see God's hand all the way through this, even in the loss of Julian, right?
Yes.
And was that the hardest moment?
The hardest moment was the state of Florida, 6 months later, calling us back, asking if we could adopt Juliet, because they had failed. And he was in the hospital and not in a good situation. And that was the hardest, because I felt like, God, why is this on me? I wanted to be this kiddo's mom. Why are Kent and I having to have this almost burden of a decision, this weight? I shouldn't say burden, a weight of this decision, when we had Callan, who was 6 months old. And Callan at this point was 10 pounds and still working through a lot of medical appointments. And we had to make the best yes for Callan. But in my mind, how can I be loyal and faithful and obedient to God? Is this his way of saying, here's your opportunity? Or is this not? We just didn't know what to do. And it came down to what was the best choice for Callan. And they were 5 days apart. And we would have essentially had 2 NICU kiddos who were twins. And we didn't feel at that time we could say yes. And it was hard because I felt like we were being disobedient. But now I just see it's because we would have had to probably say no for financial reasons to Carter, or I don't know. But when Carter came,
his brother.
Yes, thank you, Donna. Yeah, Carter, his biological brother. So we would have had 3 under 1. I don't know. But now looking back, Carter, I think, was God's way of saying, I'm still here. We are still in relationship, and there's no, the Julian piece though still feels I don't know what to make of all of it. And I still worry and pray for him, actually in reverse order, pray and think of him often. I don't know where he is in the world. And I pray that he knows God someday, if not today.
And
he's 3.5 now.
And the heart of that is we don't always get the ending on this side of heaven. We don't get to see it. We don't always get to know it. But I love the faithfulness of your prayers and covering him, and who knows what that's doing in his life. So,
and maybe he's placed with a family who gets to be parents because of him. You know, that's what I pray for. So,
and for his health. Yeah. And kind of wrapping up, what would you, so this is a podcast for leaders. We always love to take it back to our leaders. We love your story. I love just how you just claimed God's promises over this. But what would you say to leaders? What's your word to them as they lead, as they are where God's planted them to be, as they're walking through their stories also?
I think everybody's story is different. And I think I've learned that this is just our worst story, right? And so I think people go through different trials and tribulations. And, you know, we tend as humans to say, oh, well, that's not that bad, or this is worse, or I feel guilty. You preached, Pastor, a few weeks ago about I think it was the weight of prayer and not wanting to ask something because, you know, I don't really need that, or, you know, my health isn't that bad. And, you know, like everyone has their story. And I think all that God asks is that you just have a discussion with him about it. You know, I don't think you have to overthink, is my story worse than another? And I say that to the leaders of, they're going to walk with people through different things, and it can feel some days like the most, oh, that's what's bothering you today? Wow, so-and-so's family member has cancer, you know, like, but all you can do is what God did with me, which is sit with them, be with them, and feel with them. And I think that no matter the trial or the hard part, so I think they don't have to have the answers. That's where Kent and I think, did a really good job of just sitting with each other in our emotion, and not having to fix it, because I don't know where we would have fixed our story. That was way above our power.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and the power of prayer. Like, I love how you talked about Connie Johnson's prayer over you guys, and Kaylin. Yeah, before he was even born.
No, that's beautiful. I think for me, like, a couple things really stand out, and that's like, and it's easy to like listen to this and like you're on this side of this story and like you went through this hard.
The flowers are here,
right? Yeah, but I think like what we saw in you was just a profound trust, in both you and Ken, a profound trust like through the hard. Like, we got to reassure you that, you know, God's with you. He's got a plan, but you knew that, and you were saying that even unprompted, and I think just your trust through the hard. And so I think for leaders, like, it's easy, well, your story turned out well, so that we can trust, but you trusted in the middle of it. And so I think like that we can, when we're going through whatever our hard is, that we can trust him. And then the other thing just for leaders is the impact of the little things. Like, you talked about a lot of people that had an impact, or your church had an impact, and it wasn't this big grand gesture that we made. Like, it was the little things of you Donna gathering the staff to talk, or this person saying just a little word at the right time. And I think like we sometimes miss that little things can have a big impact. And so as leaders, like, just remember to do the little things.
Yeah, I think we get afraid to, like, well, this is just a little gesture. It's not that big of a deal. And lean into it, because God could use that in really mighty ways. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with us. And yeah, I would love to have you back and hear a little bit more. But thank you for listening to Jesus-Centric Leadership. Have a great day.